Welcome to this explainer. Today we're exploring a seriously fascinating reality about how we operate in the world. It's the premise that human choice is, well, it's never truly neutral. Every single day, you navigate this massive maze of decisions, and you probably feel like you're the one holding the map, right? But what if the maze itself was deliberately drawn to guide your exact steps?
Just think about that for a second. Who really designed the last difficult choice you made? Whether you were signing up for a pension, clicking accept on some digital subscription, or literally just choosing what to eat in the cafeteria, your decision absolutely did not happen in a vacuum. You were guided by an invisible architect. And today, we're going to figure out exactly how this behavioral architecture actually works.
Okay, let's dive right into our agenda for this explainer. First, defining the nudge. 2, the mechanics of defaults. 3, life, death, and pensions. 4, smart and social norms. 5, the power of simplification. And finally, 6, the limits of nudging.
Section 1. Defining the nudge.
So, behavioral economists Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein established some pretty strict definitions for us here. A nudge is essentially any aspect of choice architecture that predictably influences your behavior, but, and this is absolutely key, without restricting your options. Choice architecture is just the totality of the environment shaping your choices. We're talking the order of the options, the default settings, the framing, the whole shebang. And the fundamental rule you need to remember? There is absolutely no such thing as a neutral architecture. None. An unconsidered design is still a design. It's just a poorly planned one.
So, the crucial point here is understanding the actual boundary of what a nudge is. Look, if a government outright bans a product or slaps a heavy tax on it, that is a material mandate. It fundamentally changes your economic incentives. A nudge, on the other hand, merely changes the presentation, the timing, or the cognitive ease of a choice. Crucially, it preserves your formal freedom. If you don't like the nudge, you can easily ignore it or override it. This distinction is quite literally the bedrock of behavioral policy.
Section 2. The mechanics of defaults.
The single most studied nudge in the world is the default. The option that applies if you just do nothing. But why do defaults stick so stubbornly? Well, it's basically a logical pipeline made up of 3 cognitive mechanisms. First up, status quo bias. The current arrangement just kind of feels natural. Second is loss aversion. Any departure from that status quo feels like a loss. And human beings, we feel losses much more sharply than equivalent gains. And third, present bias. Even if you really want to change, you procrastinate. You just defer the effort to tomorrow. Put all these together, and it means the psychological cost of changing systematically exceeds the cost of just doing nothing.
Section 3. Life, death, and pensions.
The sheer scale of the default effect is honestly massive. To put this into perspective, let's look at Johnson and Goldstein's study on organ donation consent across Europe. Countries with an opt-out system, meaning presumed consent, show these absolutely incredible consent rates between 86 and 100%. But in opt-in countries, where you have to actively register, rates plummet to somewhere between 4 and 28%. And here's the kicker. These countries actually have very similar underlying attitudes toward donation. So the difference isn't culture. The difference is almost entirely the default setting.
And we see the exact same power in financial markets. Madrian and Shia looked at a U.S. company that switched its 401k pension scheme from opt-in to automatic enrollment. Just by flipping that default, participation jumped from 49% to 86% in a single month. But there is a dark side here. The company set the default contribution rate at 3%, and because of that inertia we just talked about, that 3% became a really sticky norm. People just stayed there for years, even if they desperately needed to be saving more. So the default saved them by enrolling them, sure, but it dangerously anchored their long-term financial behavior.
Section 4. Smart and social norms.
So, if we humans are basically trapped by present bias and loss aversion, how on earth can we design elegant solutions around these flaws? The answer is brilliant behavioral engineering. Take Thaler and Banerjee Save More Tomorrow, or SMART program. It literally uses our biases against themselves. Instead of asking you to save more today, which, let's face it, hurts, it asks you to pre-commit to saving more in the future, completely bypassing your present bias. Then it ties those contribution increases to your future pay raises. That means your take-home pay never drops, totally neutralizing loss aversion. Finally, it makes the escalation automatic, turning your inertia from your worst enemy into your greatest ally. It's just a perfect example of making a choice easy, attractive, social, and timely. Behavioral scientists call this the East Framework.
Another massive tool is the social norm, but man, it requires incredibly delicate calibration. Say a utility company tells you that you use more energy than your neighbors. That's a descriptive norm. You will very likely reduce your consumption to match the herd. But there's a catch. It's called the boomerang effect. If you tell highly energy-efficient people they use less than their neighbors, they will actually increase their usage to match the norm. To fix this, designers often have to add an injunctive norm. Think of a smiley face on your utility bill. It clearly shows social approval for low usage, effectively preventing that boomerang effect.
Section 5. The power of simplification.
Simplification, literally just making things easier to understand. There's a famous study by Kling and colleagues that looked at Medicare prescription drug plans. When seniors were simply provided with a personalized, simplified letter showing them the lowest cost plan for their specific medications, a massive number of them switched and saved money. No automatic enrollments, no complex commitment devices, just removing friction. Reducing the cognitive complexity of a choice environment can be absolutely as powerful as the most sophisticated architectural nudge out there.
Section 6. The limits of nudging. Now, defaults aren't magic, right? They break down when pushed way too far. For example, when one company set an extreme 12% default pension rate, people actively opted out. The inertia was broken by the sheer financial cost. Nudges can also trigger what's called moral licensing, where doing one good thing makes us feel entirely entitled to make a poor choice later. Plus, nudges have distributional effects. Chetty's research found that while automatic pension contributions genuinely increase total savings for low-income workers, high-income earners simply substitute. They just reduce their savings in other accounts to balance out the default.
It is absolutely vital that we don't let behavioral economics become an excuse to blame poor choices on cognitive bias when the real issue is just poverty. Think about it. If someone takes out a predatory loan, are they suffering from present bias, meaning they're just underweighting the future cost? Or are they facing a liquidity constraint, meaning they literally have zero cash to pay rent today? Nudging with commitment devices only works for the first scenario. If someone genuinely lacks cash, they don't need a nudge, they need income support and fair credit access. And this distinction brings us right to the commitment device. Basically, this is a voluntary arrangement where you actively constrain your future choices to protect yourself from your own lack of self-control. But here is the catch. A commitment device requires you to be a highly sophisticated agent. You have to actively realize that you suffer from present bias to even demand the device in the first place. You have to know your future self might fail and willingly lock the door today. Which brings us to the ultimate modern choice architecture: algorithmic governance. The algorithms that dictate what news you see, what credits you're offered, and what jobs you're shown. These are automated choice architectures operating at a totally massive scale. And the huge danger here is ethical fading. Because the system is automated, the human designers and reviewers eventually stop feeling structurally responsible. Without strict transparency and contestability, ethical fading just becomes the structural default of our entire digital world. Knowing that there is no neutral choice architecture, knowing that every single default, every interface, and every algorithm is predictably shaping your behavior, we are left with a really urgent question. Are the algorithmic and institutional choice architectures you live within designed for your benefit or for the architects? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope you look at your next choice just a little bit differently.